This table also works great for showing things like this. So you guys are all familiar with, and we have talked a little bit about the scientific process. So if I gave you all these pieces of this puzzle, I'm sure you could figure it out. But let's do it together. The first thing for the scientific process is observation. We have to look around and decide what we want to experiment with, right? After that, we build ourselves a hypothesis. What are we going to talk about? And when we have that hypothesis, we get to do the fun part, which is experiment. Experimenting provides results, right? You play around, you do something, you find out what the results are. Once you have those results, then we get to take a look at what those results tell us. Either the evidence is going to support our result, bing, or maybe it's not. The hypothesis is inconsistent. So if we do that, then we have to, if it's inconsistent, we have to revise our hypothesis. It's back to this step. Then we go again. However, if the evidence supports our hypothesis, then we just repeat the experiment to make sure, right? And once we do that and it supports it again, we have our scientific theory. This is the scientific method, right? And I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about this. It's a really great thing. But what I want to do is just change a few pieces. Sorry, lost a piece. I'm going to change a few pieces and kind of show you how we can turn this into the creative process. And this is what we're going to do together over the next couple of minutes here. So this one stays the same. We still have to observe whenever we're trying to write a story. It's great to look around ourselves and find things in our lives that can help us tell great stories. And after that observation, we have, instead of a hypothesis, we have our story idea. This is only different in that it doesn't have to be based on truth, right? We can write fiction, we can make up crazy fun things like superheroes, etc. And then we can come up with this fun story idea that might make the truth or might make our real world even seem bigger. And then we experiment. This is where we write your first ideas of your story down, or you sketch out your drawings to kind of see maybe what it's going to look like. I love that period. That's my favorite part of the whole process. And I have a feeling you will like it too. Crying out loud. I say to the drawing board. This is where I spend most of my time drawing spooky pictures and reading and writing great books. You should read this book. It's fun. It's amazing. It's full of adventure. All right. And of course, goobers. Watercolor goobers. Don't worry. They're not as bad as you think. All right. So we talked a little bit about the scientific process. And this board is also great for me to kind of think through some of these things. So I decided to do it here. I'm going to talk you quickly through the scientific process, which you know very well by now, or at least you're going to learn it soon. First step is observation. We look around us and see what we think we need to change or something we think could benefit from science. Then we come up with a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a guess of what we think, how we can solve things. After our hypothesis, well, then we get to do the fun part. This is where we get our hands dirty and we experiment. This is a really great part of the process. And in science, this is kind of where we spend most of our time, is in the experiment thing. But out of an experiment comes results. And out of those results, we have two possible things that can happen. Either the evidence from the results support the hypothesis, which is good, or we get the opposite, right? Does not support our hypothesis. Not so good. So if we have to do that, if it doesn't support it, we have to revise our hypothesis, back to this step and do it again. However, if the evidence supports it, we only have to go back to the experiment step to do it again, right? And we do this to make sure our results were correct. And when that happens, after we've gone through this step a few times, we have a scientific theory. It's a very, very cool process because it gets us awesome results every single time. And the creative process, creating stories, writing music, learning a new dance, all those things use the same process. And I'm going to show you that really quick. So in creative process, observation stays the same. We look around the world around us and we try to find things that are going to inspire us to come up with new ideas. But the hypothesis changed. Instead of it being a scientific hypothesis or a scientific guess, this can be anything we want. This is where it can be fiction, right? So we don't always have to have things based on truth, even though we can with a story, but we can add all kinds of other things. Superheroes, for example. After that, we write down, oops, almost did the wrong one, the fun part. Once again, experiment. But this time is where you write down your ideas and you sketch them out. And I love this part. This is by far my favorite part of the process. I love sketching. Sketching is a blast for me, and I love that early part when you're writing down story ideas because nothing is wrong, which is really fun. From that experiment, we produce a first draft. We're going to talk about this next time, but the first draft is where you write things down and kind of make things more solid. And then you share that with people, just like in the scientific process. And from there, we get one of two results. Hey, this is great. I totally see what you're trying to do. The story makes sense and everything is great. Or we get, not sure this works. And then we do the same thing. If it's not sure this works, we might have to go all the way back to story idea and kind of redefine what our story idea might be, all the way before we go to the experiment stage again. But if it works great, maybe we just need to fine-tune a few things, right? So we're going to go through and maybe hit this writing stage, this first draft stage, and kind of clean up anything that is confusing. And then, when that's done, we end up with an amazing story, which is our goal. I promise you, by the time we're done with this process, every one of you is going to be down here. This is a repeatable and easy process to get used to, but it can have a lot of interesting things, tricks and pitfalls that can trip us up on the way. We're going to talk about that next.